Welcome to The Explainer. I'm so thrilled to have you here today. Look, we are going to dive straight into a truly fascinating and honestly, a completely different way of looking at how we perceive the world around us. We're going to be unpacking a philosophical framework put forward by the author Xu Feng, written back in December of 2020. And the absolute core idea here, well, it's that what you feel might actually be vastly more secure and reliable than what you think. Let's get right into it.
So, I want you to start by asking yourself a pretty fundamental question. How do you perceive the unknown? Seriously, think about it. When you're trying to navigate an unpredictable future, or deciding if you should trust a brand new person, or figuring out if a certain life path is right for you, what tool do you reach for? Do you sit down and make a pros and cons list? Do you lean heavily on logic, data, maybe historical precedent? Well, today we are exploring a philosophy that argues that using logic to navigate the unknown is actually the absolute fastest way to get completely lost.
All right, Section 1, Beyond the Five Senses, Defining Human Perception.
Normally, we rely on a pretty strict division of how we experience reality, right? On one side, you've got your five physical senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. And according to the text, these are strictly meant for the material world. They're great for navigating physical space, knowing not to touch a hot stove, for instance. But there's an entirely different side of this coin. The author argues that human beings actually possess a sixth sense, a spiritual sense. And this single, standalone spiritual sense is exclusively required to perceive the non-material world. Think about it. You can't use your eyes or your ears to perceive the past, the future, heaven, hell, or even the inner thoughts and physiological fields of the people around you. To understand future luck or incoming danger, this framework says you have to rely entirely on this spiritual perception.
Moving on to Section 2, The Trap of Rationality and Why Logic Fails.
Let's break down exactly why this philosophy argues that rational analysis is so inherently unreliable. First off, logical inference is deeply flawed because it depends entirely on pre-existing knowledge. And where exactly does that knowledge come from? Well, it comes from the teachings of those who came before us, from books, and from our five physical senses, which, as we just established, are strictly limited to the material world. The author basically asserts that past experiences can never, ever solve the unique difficulties and predicaments that you are going to face in the present and the future. By using the past to try and predict the future, you're essentially using a hammer to turn a screw. It's just the wrong tool for the job.
And to really drive this point home, the author actually takes aim at history itself, noting, historical experiences are mostly distorted records. Perhaps it was not at all as it was recorded in Sima Qian's historical records. The text points out that even these incredibly admired historical events in Chinese history, things like the abdications of Yao, Shun, and Yu, might literally be completely fabricated from limited clues. The core argument here is simple, but it's profound. If history itself is just a distorted record, then using that unreliable history to logically analyze and predict future scenarios is completely useless. A logical conclusion drawn from faulty data is for sure always going to be faulty.
Which brings us to Section 3, The Sixth Sense in Action, Everyday Experiments.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how tactile it is. The author provides this highly specific, physical procedure for testing out your sixth sense. Let's walk through it together. Imagine you've got an unread book in front of you, and you want to know if it's worth your time. Step 1. Do not read the reviews online. Instead, physically roll the book up into a cylinder. Step 2. Touch the center of that rolled-up book right with the palm of your hand. Step 3. Just wait and feel. The text states that if you feel a blast of warm air in your palm, the book is absolutely valuable to you. But, and here's the kicker, if you feel a current of cold air, the book isn't just worthless, it might actually be actively harmful to you.
This totally beautifully illustrates the underlying thesis of the author's whole framework. The palm of your hand, acting as this internal, physical manifestation of your spiritual perception, it just will not deceive you. It provides a direct, uncorrupted signal. On the flip side, relying on external, rational recommendations from other people absolutely can deceive you. The spiritual sense is secure, the rational analysis of others is inherently risky.
And we can directly apply this to our modern, everyday lives too. Specifically, our digital lives. The source material outlines a strict rule for dealing with social media requests. You know how it is. Someone tries to add you, and you usually get, a first sentence, a tiny profile picture, maybe a short video. The author argues that this tiny little snippet actually contains all the information you need.
if you use your spiritual sense. If that very first impression makes you feel comfortable and refreshed, you approve them. Done. Conversely, if you feel uncomfortable, unpleasant, maybe a bit dark or dim, you deny them. No rationalizing it, no second-guessing, just a direct response to your perception.
And that leads right into Section 4, the danger of time, trusting the first telepathy.
So here's a massive warning from the text. If your very first spiritual sense about someone is bad, you must stop interacting with them immediately, like right then and there. Why? Because prolonged interaction forces us out of our intuitive spiritual sense and drags us straight into the messy trap of rational analysis and cognitive judgment. The author uses this incredibly poetic, almost haunting translation to describe what happens when you ignore that very first instinct. Cut, it won't sever. Sort, it becomes messier. It is your troubling woe, and an unspeakable taste fills your heart. Basically, you get tangled up in logic, and you completely lose the clarity of that initial protective intuition.
So the crucial point we arrive at is Section 5, the universal rule, decluttering the mind.
The text takes this internal feeling and elevates it to an ultimate, universal rule. The author argues that spiritual perception is the single most effective and accurate tool for evaluating, well, everything. We're not just talking about getting a bad vibe from a single person anymore. We're talking about evaluating an entire theory, a religion, a political party, even a whole country, and ultimately the future itself. The source material is entirely clear on this. Across all of these massive, wildly complex societal categories, logic and historical data will absolutely fail you, but your spiritual perception will give you the accurate answer every single time. Which leaves us with this fascinating final paradox from the source material. Think about it. If our spiritual sense is our most vital protective tool, how on earth do we keep it sharp? The answer, according to the text, is actually by limiting our rational input. The author explicitly states that reading bad books and listening to bad words actively dulls our spiritual perception. The more messy knowledge and information that you cram into your brain, the more spiritually insensitive you will become. You're essentially cluttering up the exact channel you need to navigate the world accurately. And that brilliantly illustrates the core challenge this philosophy leaves us with. If tuning into our intuition requires tuning out the noise, well, we have to make a choice. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative question to ponder today. What messy information will you tune out? How are you going to declutter your mind so you can finally feel that warm breeze of intuition in the palm of your hand? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep trusting those senses, and I'll see you next time.